Of MeepleTown. Today we're going to be looking at the newest expansion for Uprising called Titans of the First Age. Now this is a game that right now is on GameFound. I just did a video showing some of the gameplay off, giving my review, my final thoughts and all that. And I really just wanted to kind of point out some of the things for the new expansion. This is not a paid preview or anything like that. Just wanted to kind of talk about those things because I really enjoyed this game. And this is a game that's not going to retail to really big box games, small publisher. And so really GameFound is the only place that you can find this. And so I wanted to give you a heads up on some of those things that it has available. Now, when I did the last review, I was just showing off the base game. I have played some of the expansion stuff for the first expansion, and this expansion has some really unique things that I think are really going to enhance it. Besides just giving you new factions, there's some new pieces in this. So I want to kind of talk through those. I'll show some screenshots. I was actually able to see some of the new features, met with Cornelius with, excuse me, with nemesis.games, and he pointed out some of these features, and so I'll have some screen grabs that I took and some videos kind of interspersed throughout using tabletop simulator, I think is what we were using. And so I'll show some of those new pieces in that as well, but I don't have any final components to talk about. So the first thing I want to talk about are the new Druid cards. If you've played the original or saw my playthrough, you saw these little tiny Druid cards that you flip over every round, every chapter, that are going to allow you to have these different special abilities whenever you roll those lightning bolts. Now that's changed up a little bit in a couple of ways. One, those are going to be flipped over the entire game now, so you'll have access to all of those druids and those special abilities, which I think is helpful in a couple of ways. One, it gives you more options, but also I tend to forget to use those Druid cards, but I think if they're all available throughout the entire game, I'm probably going to be a little more apt to use those. But on top of that, there are also these tarot-sized cards with art on them, which makes them look fantastic. I've seen some of the art on these cards, and I just think they're really well done, as like all the art and all the components in this game are really well done. But I like that. I think it's a nice touch. It wasn't anything that they needed to do. They're still going to fit on the board, just kind of angled a little bit differently. But I think those are going to be really nice. They also introduced this new resource called Ether that's going to be used not just with those, but you'll see those featured on those new cards. Another big thing before we get to the factions, there's a couple more things before we get to the factions, but the Mercenaries. Now Mercenaries I think might be my favorite thing in this whole faction. And I'll talk about it now, and then I'll talk about it again when we talk about one of the new factions. But the Mercenaries, basically, they have their own standees, they have their own cards, and so you're limited to how many mercenaries you can have based on, you know, your regular hand limit. But they're going to give you different special abilities, and these are characters that you're recruiting mercenaries into your armies that you're going to use, and they can be pretty powerful. Some of them are really cool, but they're also pretty expensive. And on top of that, if you remember, whenever you have a faction that dies and they go to the graveyard of one of those nemesis, you know that they're going to gain a point for that. And so as these mercenaries are dying off, they're going to get more and more points. And so even if they are really cool, and some of them can be kind of expensive, they're still also going to be giving the benefit to the nemesis overall, because they'll be able to get the victory points on those. And I think those are really, it's just unique. You know, you can have new units, like they're not part of your army necessarily, and again I'll talk about that in the faction, but it acts as like this whole new unit that you're hiring for a specific period of time. And I think that's cool, because when you're using your factions, sometimes you can get really locked in on getting those cheap ones out, because it's easier to get them out, and plus, you know, until later on in the game when you can expand your presence a little bit more, you won't be able to get any of those cool new your elite troops out onto the board. And so this allows you to be able to do that with also, you know, not necessarily breaking the bank, even though some of them, again, are fairly expensive. We also have the Banes. Now, the Banes are going to be added to the different legions and the hordes as they come out, and these are going to benefit them. These are not a benefit to you, as you can imagine, but these Banes are going to be these tokens that go on top of those legions or hordes whenever they come into play, and they'll give them a benefit. It could be they will get extra speed or get extra activation, different things that they can do to activate them. Now, one thing you need to know is all of these different pieces are modular. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. So that's good. If you're like me playing this game and you're like, wow, I'm never going to win this game, even though I have won one time. Even though it can be that way and be a really harsh game that beats you up, if you're like really good at this game, then you might want to add these Banes in there to make it more difficult. I can go ahead and tell you, I'm probably not really going to add these in early on, especially. Maybe if I get a little bit better at this game. But I love that it adds that option because there are people, believe it or not, who are very good at this game. I've not seen them or met them yet, but I hear they exist. Another thing that the game introduces are new dice, which I think is really cool. The way that these dice kind of come into play. I think the dice in this game are neat anyway, just because they are all different, good at different things. You know, some are better at battling, and you've got your archery dice and things like that. But these three new dice are pretty unique. So you have the bronze, silver, and gold, and I'll just kind of go through those really quickly. The bronze dice, you're going to, it's basically like an all or nothing with these bronze dice. So half of the dice are blank sides, and half of them have double symbols on there, so like double shields and things like that. So it's big risk, big reward with these dice, and it depends on what you have that are going to give you these dice to roll, but they can be very helpful. Again, half the time. The silver dice, which are going to be the king of defense dice, this is what Cornelius from nemesis.games donned these, and that is the king of defense. So you've got 50% of the dice on here are shields, but you also have a star on these dice, and the star is going to be a wild resource, which is really interesting because it can be anything. It can be the skull, it can be the shield, it can be your lightning bolt. It can also be a blank side because sometimes you'll want to have a blank that will benefit you with the different feats or different, mercenary things available. I think there's benefit for having blank dice at times, and so this can be helpful for that. And then you've got the gold dice, which have 0 blanks on them, and that's pretty cool. They're really, really powerful, but they're also really tough to get, and actually some of the new bad guys have gold dice that they're going to roll. And then there's one, if I remember right, has like a shield, a skull, and a lightning bolt on it, which is pretty cool, and again, really, really powerful dice. So those are all the modular things before we get to the different factions, and I'll go through these because I think this is one of the big reasons that you might want to get this game. I can go ahead and tell you, without the new factions, and everything is going to come in the same box, but even without these new factions, I think the Mercenaries are fantastic. I love the idea of having new dice. The Druid cards are a really nice bonus and something that I will throw in everything, in every game that I play, as long as those other pieces. But anyway, even without these new factions, I think up to this point, those are some pretty cool additions. Now with the new factions, I'm going to talk about the pirates first. So the pirates are going to start with a mercenary, which is really cool. You've got 3 options. You're going to draw 3 mercenaries at the beginning of the game. You're going to keep one of those, and you're going to have it with your crew. Now the other cool thing is it counts as your roster, so as your unit roster. And so this is the only faction that's going to be able to rebuild those mercenaries. Normally, when they die, they go to the graveyard, and you're not able to get those back. But with the pirates, you can actually get those back and use them later on, which is good because you only have 2 units with this faction, which is bad, right? But I think I'm excited to play these a lot because I think it's going to be cool to see how that balances out. But they only have 2 units. They've got the raiders, which are these basic units, and like every faction has, and that's the melee warriors. And then you have the sharkholds, which are the elite warriors, but they're also only melee. So you're thinking, wow, no archers on this crew, and that can be really bad because archers, if you remember, they fire first, and then everybody else comes in behind that. But what makes this faction really unique, other than having the mercenary piece, which I think is pretty cool. But you have these blade ship havens, and now these blade ship havens, normally your havens stay in one spot in one of the hexes. These are mobile, and so they're going to be moving around the board, and they're going to chain together as well. So when they chain together, you're actually going to be able to move troops up through that chain, and so you'll be able to move them very quickly, which is really interesting. But you're also going to, they act as archers, so they're going to go on these raids as well. And if you have these around, adjacent to this hex, you're going to roll an additional white die before the battle starts, and then during the battle as well. But again, that's just the way that archers work. It's just that your havens are now going around and doing that. Now you might be thinking, what about like if a legion targets you? If a legion targets you, typically they go after your havens, right? They're going to start and attack your home hex first, typically, with that haven. But since your havens are moving around the board and they can't, have these moving targets, they're actually going to target your home hex. And then when they hit them, it's going to flip your hex over, and they'll get, I think it was 3 points whenever they're doing that. And so you want to make sure that you have a little bit of help there on your home hex. But I think it's interesting that the havens, because they're mobile, work very differently. I'm super pumped about this faction. I think it's really cool. The art on it's really neat. I think the feats are going to be really cool as well. But the fact that you're going to get more and more mercenaries, that's the piece that I like the most. And I think I'm just going to try to load up on those mercenaries when I get a chance to play this. Titans are the next one, and they're really unique as well. I think both of these factions are really cool and very different, stray from that normal mold that you see from like the base box, which is fine because again, that I really like this game. I wasn't knocking those, but it is, these are very, very unique. So the Titans are going to act as a horde, which I think is really cool. So if you look at the game and you see the horde card and they have the threat tokens on there, well, your character that you're playing with actually has that as well. And so and they also start off with 5 attributes. However, their attributes aren't those attributes that go underneath your hero card to kind of get, your feat cards that give you more attributes. They don't have any of those. Instead, they're these different action feats and things like that you see on those other cards. They're also going to interact with the Banes, so they'll be able to steal those Banes and use those Banes, which I think is really cool. But go back to the threat piece. So your hero card, just like a horde card, is going to have those threat markers on there. And if they have threat, then it's going to be a hero, a unit, and a haven. That's the way your hero is going to act as, which I think is really, really cool and can be probably really powerful as well. However, if you don't have any threat on your card, if you lost all your threat, then they're just going to act as your heroes. And on top of that, if the nemesis destroys your hero, gets your threat down to 0, then they're going to gain 5 victory points. And so you're going to want to make sure that you are keeping up with moving that threat up on your marker. And you might be thinking, well, how can I do that? Well, they have extra actions on their card that the normal factions don't have. One is Devour, so instead of placing a haven, they don't have that haven action to be able to put those out there. Instead of placing a haven, they'll devour hexes, and then so they're slowly kind of chewing up the map as they're moving along, and there's going to provide points for them. They also have Primal Lore, which is worth, it costs 2 action points, and when you use that, you're going to flip and resolve an adjacent hex. So you can be next to it and then flip that hex over and then resolve it. Or you can be on it as well, but it's going to cost 2 action points. So you're probably going to want to see what's going around there first before you just go around and start eating up all of these. And then the last one, the new action that they have on there, is the Feast. Now this goes back up to how can I increase my threat? Well, with the Feast action, you can actually spend your resources and even a victory point if you want to move your threat back up. And so the way Cornelius described it to me is you've got your characters, your Titans, going around the board and kind of eating up the map, and they're getting a lot of victory points by doing that. However, they're probably going to be spending those because as they're losing their threat, they're going to need to increase that, and a good way to do that is by using victory points. And so I just think that's really unique, that piece that you're playing as a horde, and I think that's going to play out pretty uniquely. Both of these play out very uniquely, and I really can't wait to try this new expansion out. I'll have a link in the description below to show you how to get to GameFound, but just know that if this is a game that interests you, definitely check out, I did a gameplay video and I'll have that link in there as well. of the base game to kind of show you how one of those chapters plays out, which I think hopefully gives you an idea if this is a game for you. It's getting a lot of really good buzz, good reviews, and I totally understand because I think it's a really fun, challenging, cooperative game that's Euro-y in the point style, but also that you're rolling dice, and so it has some of that Amerithrashing in there as well. So for me, it's because it's super thematic and all of those pieces, I really enjoy this game, and I cannot wait to get the expansion stuff to the table as well. So if you want to check it out, definitely go to that link below and it'll show you all the information on there. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us at MeepleTownGames.com. You can also reach out to us at MeepleTownGames on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. You can go to the guild at BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 3407. We have like guild conversations that happen in there as well. And until next time, thanks for coming down to MeepleTown.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks to our Patreon supporters for making content like this possible. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter, go to patreon.com/MeepleTown. To follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, find us at MeepleTown Games. Finally, to connect with us and other residents of MeepleTown, you can join Guild 3407 at BoardGameGeek.com. Until next time, thanks for coming down to MeepleTown.